Hi everyone and welcome back to the Be Europe show. I'm Harry.
And I'm Mireia from Eurodesk, and we are very happy to be here again in the 9th episode of the Be Europe show, which today takes us in a virtual journey to Iceland. Harry, do you know that although Iceland is not a member of the European Union, is a full member of the Erasmus Plus program? What a place to have an Erasmus experience, huh?
Yeah, I didn't know that actually. I knew that Ireland obviously wasn't a member of the EU, but I didn't realise that as part of the European Economic Area, obviously since 1994, that was part of the agreement that the Erasmus Plus program. So no, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and also Iceland is the second largest island in Europe and one of the oldest democracies in the world. The country has the oldest parliament in the world that is still existing. Harry, do you know which city is the capital of Iceland?
I do. I know the capital city is Reykjavik, which is the northernmost capital in the world, actually. But what I love most about the country is its nature. If you go to visit Iceland, you cannot miss it. You'll find from glaciers to ice caves, waterfalls, volcanoes and lava fields to mountains, hot springs, and even the northern lights, which I'm really hoping to see sometime. And for road trip lovers, it's like a paradise. You can take the ring road, a national road that circles the country and visits the entire island. So it's a must see.
Yes, it's true. It's really amazing. I had the opportunity to visit Iceland a few years ago and it left me speechless. Honestly, it's super beautiful and super stunning. But you have to be prepared because it can be also really cold. I went there on November and it was quite windy. And do you know, Harry, this is crazy. I just found out not that much ago that the Icelandic language actually has over 100 words just to talk about wind.
Wow, that's a lot of words. And I think there are no mosquitoes in Iceland either.
Yeah, no mosquitoes and no McDonald's.
No McDonald's. That's interesting. I suppose now that you mentioned McDonald's, I was thinking about Icelandic food, and I want to try. I'm going to pronounce this Skyk or Skyerk. Maybe our guest can help us. The Icelandic yogurt. But first, maybe eat some smoked lamb that I think the Icelandics love to eat.
Yeah, and once you have energy, you can go to Iceland Airwave Music Festival, which takes place each November in Reykjavik.
Oh, that sounds like a plan. I think we need to get some good food and music and nature, and we can do it in the one trip. But for now, I think we should stop our fantasies and continue the show. I think it's probably time to introduce today's guest. So I would like to welcome Alma.
Let's welcome. Hello.
Hi, Alma.
Hello.
Our pronunciations were definitely a little off.
Just a bit, but I mean with practice. So it's Reykjavik, which is the capital of Iceland, and
Okay.
I think you're talking about Sker. But we love our R's here in Iceland, so.
Okay, that's good. At least we've got a bit of a lesson now. So we've learned all we need to know about Iceland, and some of the pronunciations will definitely need to improve. But for now, I think we'd probably start with Alma getting you to introduce yourself, if you wouldn't mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Alma and I come from Iceland, and I'm turning 29 next month. But in the last decade, I have lived and traveled, studied and worked abroad, both through the Erasmus programs, but also through all the ways I did around the world trip. I did my studies in the US, and I've done a lot of different things. But now I'm back here in Iceland, where I put down a bit of roots, and I'm building a social enterprise, a startup that is called Heima. So that is what I do full time now. Besides that, I have 3 cats that I love very much, and I love to spend my free time with friends and family, to cook, and to build things and make the world a better place. So that is what I do.
Sorry, could you maybe tell us a little bit more about your work at the moment specifically? Maybe talk to us a bit about your current venture.
Absolutely. So we are building a mobile app that is called Heima, and it helps families organize their household work and family responsibilities. It's kind of a project manager for the family to organize everything and keep an overview of all the tasks that need to be done around the house. And they're using machine learning to do this very easy and to help people sort of keep track of everything that needs to be done, and also to balance the workload. And the inspiration comes from my work in gender equality. I've been working for the Icelandic government as a gender equality expert for the last 2 years. And there we were sort of mapping the pillar problems of gender inequality here in Iceland and beyond. And one of them was unequal division of household work, because women do 75% of all household work globally. And I thought this was fascinating because we are solving this problem in workplaces in different ways. And I thought, why don't we create a software solution for this problem that people can use in their house to have a better balance, better communication, more collaboration, better engagement of children, and of course, more gender equality in their house, which has a multiplying effect on society. So that is what I do. And I work as CEO and co-founder with my co-founders, Cecilia and Tristan, and we will be launching our beta very soon. If people are interested in knowing more, we have a website, which is heima.is.
If you can tell us maybe which are the results that you have achieved so far with this project.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we started the project in late 2020 and registered it for the biggest competition in Iceland for business ideas. It's called the Golden Egg, which we won off the bat. We have also secured almost $200,000 in non-dilutive grant funding from the Icelandic government and more. And soon we will be launching our beta that will be shared with our waitlist, which counts over 1,000 people. But before this summer, we actually launched a small beta that we shared with 10 families. We've done a lot of market research. We did an Excel prototype before we did this one. And we're looking forward to see how it's going to impact people's lives once the app is actually up and going. So I will be testing it actually this week so we can share it with our waiting list.
Oh, okay. So it's close the date. It's truly close.
We're getting there.
And Alma, you went on an exchange. You went as an exchange student to Greece. Can you maybe tell us a bit about that experience? And I suppose, why did you decide to take part in the exchange?
Absolutely. So I actually did a youth exchange before my exchange in Greece in 2011. And sometimes people say when you get the bug, you can't stop. So that was pretty much me. So I did my exchange in Italy 2011. Then I went on a round the world trip after I graduated college. And then I was sitting in a hotel lobby in Mexico with my friend, and we had $1,000 left each. And I thought to myself, if I can... If I register for the university, I can go on an Erasmus program. And my friend was like, okay, I'm not ready for that. I'm going to take my $1,000 and buy an iPhone. So she bought an iPhone and I registered for the university so I could go for an Erasmus program. So that is pretty much why. And then I started looking very early, like going through all the resources, which university I wanted to go to on my exchange. And it was so early that they actually refreshed the selection at the international faculty at the University of Iceland. And they had taken out a lot of the universities that I really liked. So I called them up and I was like, hey, there was a very cool university in Athens that had like a lot of information on their website. Why is it not available anymore? And they were like, well, I don't know. It just wasn't very popular. So, we didn't renew the contract. But if you really want to go, and if you promise us that you're going to go to Greece, we will renew the contract. And I was like, sure, let's do it. So it was a little bit by chance, but it was the best year of my life. And I sometimes say that I learned how to live in Greece, and I had such a good time. I made friends for a lifetime, and I have so many amazing memories of this year. And I try to go back every year, actually. And in my opinion, I've traveled to over 50 countries. Greece is the most beautiful country in the world. So,
wow,
that's
big words. Yeah. Oh, but that's amazing that we can see that it really marks a way, like a mark in your life. If you think that it's the most beautiful country that you ever visit, and also like if you have so much memories, and we know that you also had a lot of more experience and. Well, for what you said, and you also had an experience in Brussels, for example. What can you tell us? What were you doing there exactly?
Yeah. So after Greece, I went back home. I finished my bachelor's degree, and then I went and I moved to Brussels for 1 year for what was then called EVS, European Voluntary Service, but I believe it's European Solidarity Corps now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Am I getting the concept right?
Exactly. Yeah, getting it. Yes.
So the thing is that I have been actively volunteering for a youth organization for a long time, since my exchange in Italy in 2011, 2012. And this organization is called AFS, and it does youth exchanges and peace education and more. So I was an active volunteer, sort of guiding the exchange students that came to Iceland after my exchange there. And there is an umbrella organization for AFS in Europe, which is called the European Federation for Intercultural Learning. And each year they take 2 or 3, I think, EVSers to come to the office. And I had been volunteering for some large-scale events of theirs. And in one of them, we were hosting a large event in Italy, in Venice, actually on a private island. And I was there on the boat when I met the project manager. And she asked me something about Brussels. And I said I'd always wanted to live in Brussels. And she offered me the position, asked if I wanted to do it with them. And I had a lot of fun. It was a very great year. We were organizing an event that was in Norway, actually in Utøya, where the terrorist attack happened. And it was about civic education. Yeah. And we took our volunteers there to discuss different ways that we can actually create and maintain peace in Europe and beyond. And it was very impactful. And I was working on this for a year, building this event, going around Europe and also doing trainings and more. And it was a very impactful and a very big year for me. And yeah, after I finished, I actually had signed up for a master's program in San Francisco. So I went basically from Brussels to San Francisco almost directly. For my master's.
So you were not kidding at the beginning, you were really nonstop.
Yeah.
And what did you learn with this experience?
I learned a lot. I learned a lot about working with diverse people, because you actually have like this melting pot in Brussels, and the other EVSers were coming from different realities, and we were actually working, not just doing like an exchange, because it's a different reality. And then, of course, building my project management skill set. The organization was going through like a transitional period, so I also learned a lot from that. And yeah, organizing a large-scale event from start to finish. And yeah, practicing what you preach. We work with intercultural learning, and you're pretty much doing that every single day in that kind of an internship. So I learned a lot, and a lot of different things that I bring with me into everything that I've done since.
And personally, do you think that you changed a lot since you started to do all these experiences?
Yes, absolutely. It's, I think experiences like this are like personal development marathon. You're like going through these things that are really hard. And it sounds very romantic looking back, but all of these things are very hard. I mean, you're sort of like ripping yourself out of your comfort zone and going somewhere and settling down and building a new life. And it's a tricky thing, but you come out of it having learned a lot of things, experienced a lot of things. And there's like a certain maturity that comes with it, and a new perspective. And I think one of the most beautiful things that I take out of my stay with AFS, because we talk about how, when you're, because we're working with exchange students, and when you send somebody on an exchange, what you get is that when they will come back and they will become, I don't know, something very important, they will become business people or presidents or whatnot. And they will never again look at that host country as just a country. I would never be able to just say, oh yeah, Italians, they're like this, they're like that. No, Italians are my little brother Filippo, and the people of Brussels are my co-workers there, it's Isa and Elisa and all of these people that I love. And all of a sudden, you have this new perspective of the world, that it's actually people and they're closer to you than you would have thought, and we're all the same and all of this stuff. So I think that's the biggest learning outcome.
That's really interesting, actually, that kind of family mentality, that those people are no longer strangers, those countries are no longer new places. They feel like a certain part of home to you, which is really interesting. And it brings us nicely onto a question which we ask all of our guests, I suppose. But what does it mean to be European for you, to be a young European? And do you think that, I suppose, how it felt at the beginning before you went and traveled is different from how you feel now in terms of after all of the places you've been and the people that you've met and the things that you've seen? Do you feel that that's changed over time?
Definitely. For me, I think I feel first and foremost Icelandic, and then I feel Nordic, and then I feel European, and then I feel like a citizen of the world. But these dimensions have grown a lot closer to each other, like the more that I've traveled and the more that I've done. And I think being European means being a part of some sort of a community, being a part of a story, being a part of a culture, and all of these different things. Like, before I didn't take a lot of ownership over Italian culture, but now my Italian nonna has taught me how to make Italian pasta from scratch, and I can do that, so I feel a little bit more connected than I did before. And I think it's really funny because you go in a group of Europeans, and then you see like the different countries, grouping up, and then, you make the group smaller, and then it's the Scandinavians together and the Southern Europeans, and then when you go in a bigger group that has people from all around the world, you might have the Europeans together because they have a certain identity. But it's so beautiful. And I think, there's a story that always sits with me from my exchange in Greece, when we were sitting on the rooftop of one of my friends and we're looking over the Acropolis, and we were barbecuing, and it was so beautiful, and we were all sitting there and toasting and cheering. And then my friend comes to me and he's like, how silly is it? Like, why would they invest in this? Like, they're actually paying us to be here, like having a barbecue on the ceiling, like, this is so fun. Like, why would they pay for this? And I was like, exactly, because we are here having a party on a rooftop. Like, you and I are friends, and you and like everybody else here. We have people from France and Germany and Italy and Norway, and they're all sitting together feeling like a community, and we will always have these bonds, these connections for the rest of our lives. So I think it's the best investment that you could actually make, way better than a lot of the other stuff that has to be done, because it actually creates meaningful relationships from scratch that last a lifetime and changes people's perspectives.
Yeah,
so,
I think that's really interesting too, because I think a lot of young people are kind of confused as to why the European Union pays for all of these different initiatives and programs, and they're kind of like, do they realize that, we're sitting here partying or going out and having fun? And I think that's success for Discovery EU or for the Erasmus Plus program, because it makes Europe a smaller place. It brings us all closer together. And after all, that's the whole point of the European Union and Europe, is that while we might be miles apart, we feel like one big community or family. I think it's a perfect example of that. There's no big secret as to why they fund all of these projects. It's done purposely, and I think that's a great example of why. But I'm curious to know, how do you think that young people in Iceland view Europe? Do you think they view it very differently from you, or would they have a similar kind of viewpoint, do you think?
I think that, the fact that we're an island has a little bit of an impact because we are kind of further away. And I think culturally, in many ways, we are kind of close to America. But I do think that there is a common identity, and people like to travel to Europe, and we consider ourselves Europeans. But I do think that, the more you have traveled, the more time that you've spent in mainland Europe, you feel more connected to it than you otherwise would. So I probably have a little bit better connection than the average young person in Iceland. But I don't think they have I think they have a relatively strong connection, but it's the layers. You're Icelandic first, you're Nordic, and then you're European. So it's sort of a third degree connection.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's understandable. I think there's probably a lot of places similar enough. I think from being from Ireland, we have a bit of an island mentality as well. I think we feel a small bit unique because we're not joined together with other mainland Europe. But no, that's interesting.
Yeah, and exactly because of that was what you were saying now. This we also discussed it in the episode about Ireland, that as you are in Iceland, maybe sometimes you feel a bit disconnected from the mainland Europe. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that young Icelandic people feel limited or see obstacles in going abroad and experience all these opportunities because of that fact, maybe?
I think maybe. But I think Icelanders are very open-minded and very adventurous. Like we're very much, they say the national motto is everything will be okay, which is Þetta reddast. You'll hear this a lot when you come on your fantasy trip to Iceland. It's just, everything will be fine. And I feel like people, sort of live by that, and they make use of the programs and they like to go abroad. But not everybody does it. I mean, like it's just different if it's your cup of tea or not. What I do think is that because we're relatively few, a lot of people might think that we don't have a lot of impact as on European politics or more like what's going to happen. There's mixed feelings about joining the European Union or not. There's a lot of, like different vibes coming from, this particular relationship that we have with Europe. But I don't think that people experience a lot of obstacles. The universities are very active promoting all these different things. And I think the average Icelander doesn't feel like there's like a ton of obstacles. You can just, if you have the means, you can go for it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think it's what's actually, you mentioned it as well. I think about kind of, I suppose the cultural, and I'm interested to know, because of your time, obviously you studied in the US, did you notice any differences between American teenagers, young people, and maybe European young people? Did you think, I know we see it a lot on the television and it's dramatized to an extent, but do you think there's a huge difference in terms of culture or thought process, or what did you see during your time there?
I think so, definitely. I think it's worth mentioning that I went to like an international university. So I think there were actually 4 Americans on my campus. So it was not really like me entering the American reality. But of course, yes, I do have a lot of American friends. And also I studied in California, which is probably not the most impacted state. But I do think that like there's a lot of cultural differences, just the way, the relationships between kids and parents are like built, and, how the school system works, and how, how much you have to pay for studying and different things like that, that I think all impact the way people think about traveling, people think about experiences abroad, and also the way American experience Europe and Europeans America. There's this exotic factor or something. I went to America because, like you have this insane view of going to San Francisco and New York, and it's like super cool. And I think Americans have this as well about Europe. Like they want to go to Rome and Paris and London, and, like it's this thing. But I definitely think that Europeans are a little bit more maybe free to go and do. While, like Americans are more limited by, for example, economic status. You have to have rather a lot of money to be able to go and do the things that you want to do. While, like at the same time when I was in Greece, for example, I was studying with people who had no other income than just the Erasmus grant, and they just made it work. And, we had all kinds of people that were going and being able to do it because of the funding that the Erasmus program offers. So I think that is maybe the core difference. But also it takes, I think, a certain type of person to want to do this. A lot of people want to, like travel and take holidays and things like this, but not everybody is ready to uproot themselves and do something that is very challenging and hard for personal development or making connections internationally or such. So I think there's a lot of commonalities actually between the people in America and the people in Europe and Asia and beyond that actually want to go on these sort of programs, and they have a lot in common. So I think a lot of times, like culture is also like I identify with other exchange students, and I identify with other EBSers or ESCers. Because they are this kind of people, like I feel like I am. So you can find these people everywhere.
And like hearing your answer now, I was like, I'm curious to know, how do American people or people from US see Europe?
I think they see it as very diverse. And because what is really funny about this is that, the US is kind of like a continent. I mean, it's huge, but they identify as one country. While, Europe, we identify as many countries, and a continent, like so that's kind of funny. And discussing this with my American friends, I think like this is a little bit confusing, like what is the same and what is different between the European countries, because it's not, like
they don't
country,
understand.
like it's not the same way as looking at it. But I think most people from the US and the rest of America as well find Europe to be exciting, to have exciting opportunities. And in my university, we actually had a program where you could do like exchange semesters. So you could do one in San Francisco, New York, Boston, London, Dubai, and Shanghai. And almost everybody did some sort of like a rotation so they could experience something else. And London was very common for people from America, and also just people who wanted to try to live in Europe.
That's really nice.
So yeah, I think I think it's the same. We're curious about something different, but it's also very similar in a way, because it's sort of Western, and so it's
exactly
different but similar.
Yeah, so maybe like us, that we are wondering how US works, they wonder how Europe works.
Yeah.
So it's funny to hear, Yeah. And now, changing a bit the topic, let's go to the studies that you are studying and teaching gender studies. And you mentioned before that you are also working as a specialist in gender equality for the Icelandic government. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yes, absolutely. So before I studied business, actually, I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in international business. And I've had some interesting experiences in my entrepreneurial journey, where there has been a lot of pushback because I'm a woman in business. And I've been doing a lot of like personal sort of reflective work in the recent years, and trying to find my passion, because I used to be a very multi-passionate person. I was very focused on gender equality, but also on immigration, international matters, building bridges between different cultural realities, traveling, training, sustainability, the environment, like the seas, all of the stuff.
Literally everything.
Literally everything. Because I've always had this burning passion of making the world a better place. And the thing is that when you focus on a lot of things, your energy tends to like sort of get less and less that you can invest in each of these topics. So I started to think to myself, okay, if I had to pick one passion, what would it be?
Yeah.
And I went on a little bit of an introspection, and I realized that every single time I get to pick which perspective I take on a project, I always pick gender equality and women's empowerment. And I thought, why don't I try to channel all of my energy into this to make impact on scale? And so, I'm living in the US after my studies. I had a startup there that didn't work out, and I was sort of on a crossroad, and I was thinking to myself what I wanted to do. And I thought this would be an interesting time to start to do a second master's of gender studies, because this was something that I really wanted to do. And then COVID hit, and it was actually very good that I was studying, because I could go full time into that. And I had to move back to Iceland. Yeah. And it's really funny, because people say study business because it will be very easy to get a job. But for me, actually, it's been the opposite. Study gender studies and it will be very easy to get a job, because Icelanders are pioneers in gender equality, but there's not a lot of experts in this area, which means that during my studies, I've been actually offered a lot of different projects for different ministries. And I've worked for 4 different Icelandic ministries: the Prime Minister's Office, the Ministry of Industry and Innovation, the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources, and the Ministry of Justice, where I've been going and consulting, helping analyze and research different statuses of women in different from different perspectives, and developing guides to gender mainstreaming, which helps the ministry staff members keep gender equality always as a lens when they're creating different laws and policies and different things. And then, of course, I've been now for 2 years in a row teaching gender studies, or gender and sustainability, at the University of Iceland. So this is definitely a passion of mine, and is very connected to what I do at my startup, Heima, as well.
Yeah. Well, it was a long journey, but at the end you arrived, and it's nice. It's nice that you are doing something that you like. And how do you see the general current situation regarding gender equality?
Yeah. For me, I think that we've come a very long way and a lot of things have changed in the most recent years, but we still have a long way to go. And it's not enough just to say, hey, we are champions of gender equality, because what does that really mean? Every year we are realizing different things that are not okay, that we have just normalized and are okay. Like, right now you might watch like an old show or something and you realize it's like full of kind of strange things that were okay to say in 2000 or something, but aren't okay to say today. So I think it's not a linear process. It's something that is always evolving, and we have to always keep as a lens at everything that we look at. And we always have to be open to changing things and shaking things up and questioning if everything is okay. And I think that's the only way that we're going to ever reach gender equality.
And focus it on the young people. How do you see it?
I think it's very important to listen to young people, because there's always a generational shift. And I can feel it that, I felt like the older people didn't really understand where I'm coming from. And now I feel like I have a sister who is 15 years younger than me. And sometimes I feel like I don't really understand where she comes from, but then I remind myself that she has a perspective that I don't necessarily have. So I think it's very important to have participation of different ages and not to have some sort of a superiority depending on how old you are, because everybody has a perspective and everybody's perspective is valuable.
I think that's particularly, it's a nice point, I think, is from the point of view that you're very accepting, as you said, of the fact that you and your sister think a little differently and have different perspectives. And I think that acceptance and that understanding is what I suppose the next generation bring to this conversation, is a little bit more understanding maybe than past generations did. So I think that understanding will hopefully is nice progress and will help in the future to, I suppose, allow us to be just a little bit more accepting of different viewpoints and opinions. I'm curious to know, do you think, I suppose, given your work, do you see that gender equality is one of our biggest issues? What would you see as kind of the main problems facing us at the moment?
Ooh.
That's a big question. I don't expect a very simple answer. Sorry, yeah.
I do think that, climate change and environmental matters are number one. I mean, if we don't have a planet to live on, everything else sort of fades. But I do think that alongside that, we have to work on the society we live in, and we have to make it a place that not only we can live on, but that we want to live on. Mm-hmm. So I think working on gender equality is one of those pillars. And I also just think that we have unsustainable models right now, like, women doing 75% of all household work. How is that going to work in a world where, we have equality, like gender parity in pay and in positions in society and such? Like, it's just not going to work, because everybody, like everything else, takes time, and we're going to have to sort of adjust the ways that we've been doing things to new times and new norms. So I think it's up there, but I do recognize that there are other things that, drinkable water and breathable air and stuff like this, I would say is definitely number one.
Of course, no. And on the point of view of equality, do you think it's a leadership thing? Do you think that we need, for example, I know a lot of people would be familiar with the Finnish Prime Minister was recently criticised for her, I suppose, her partying during her spare time. So not like while she was working, but during her spare time. And there was a lot of talk about if the Prime Minister was a man, would he have been criticised the same way? And do you think it's a leadership change, or it's a mentality change? How can we better make things more equal? Do we need new faces in leadership, or what do you think?
I think it's definitely those both. Like, it's the leadership, and then there's the mentality, but there's also the norms, because it drizzles down, and we have to get to a point where everybody gets it, where everybody's on board, because there's always going to be pushback. And like in the case of Sanna Marin, we see a pushback because she is a woman, and people are still uncomfortable with these concepts. And I've been reading things about this, and when they're talking about what about her children, they were all home alone. Like, this is 2022. the children have a second parent, the children have a family, but people are still stuck there because the mentality has not changed and the normalization has not changed. So I think that, it starts at a leadership level. And I think a lot of the responsibility are in the highest layers. It's the politicians, it's the leaders of different brands and companies, and just like, influencers and more, like in the way they talk, and then how everything drizzles down into society. Because for me as a gender equality expert, it's very easy to get into an echo chamber of people that love gender equality and just preach to the choir, but that doesn't give any results. If I can't have a discussion with somebody who hates it, who really doesn't like it, and sort of get them to understand where I'm coming from, we're not going to have this holistic effect. So
Yeah,
I think that it's a lot of ways, but it definitely starts at the top and then it moves through all of our society.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and moving a bit because we are running up of time, so let's go a bit quickly. I'm gonna move to the last questions. So this is the European Year of Youth, and we wonder what are your plans for this specific year and also for the future coming.
Yeah. So I've managed to put all of my focus into one thing, which is my startup. With small sideline projects, and I will be working on that for the upcoming years. And just, my goal is to build a powerful company that offers great jobs to great people and creates an impact at scale. Just putting like a very effective tool into people's pockets that they can use in their households to create gender equality in their homes and then in society. So that's what I'm going to be working on, and I really hope it's going to work. And if it doesn't, then I'm just going to find something else to do the same.
I really hope it's going to work too, and I want to see the results actually. So let's pass information to us.
Absolutely. I'll keep you posted.
And also, I wanted to ask you, what do you think, like focusing now in the young people, European young people, what do you think it needs to be done for them in the current context?
Well, I think that we have to adjust the ways that we're approaching them to their culture and to what they want and what they need. I can say it from my own perspective as a volunteer for AFS. There used to be the flagship program, which was 1 year abroad. You couldn't pick your family, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. But right now people are looking for something else. Like they want to have intercultural experiences, but they want to go on around the world trip. They want to go on internships. They want to go on, leadership training, and they want to do it all at once in the same 3 months. So what I think has to happen is that we have to take note of this generational shift and to create programs that really fit the needs of a different generation, and to use that to encourage them to travel, to get to know each other, and to work together towards a better world. Because I think there's a lot of interest and a lot of power in these generations, the younger people than me, in doing great work and actually having an impact on the world. So I think so. Cater to them.
And to you too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so young generation.
And look, I think that sentiment is nice, and I think it kind of filters on nicely to our last question, which we ask all our guests, and which is always gives a really interesting answer. But I suppose, obviously, as someone who has been hugely successful and had the opportunity to travel the world and to see so many things and experience so many cultures, what advice would you give to young people who are listening to the podcast today, who are looking for a little bit of inspiration or motivation?
I would say if you want to go, you should go. And you can find ways of doing it. I do not come from a rich family. I don't have anything, more access to money or resources than you do, but I've made the most out of the programs that have been offered to me. My Erasmus was paid, my EVS was paid. I've done a lot of trips through Salto and through different ways through my volunteering. And I've traveled to 54 countries, and a lot of it has been sponsored by European programs, by different volunteering activities and more. So money is no obstacle, time is no obstacle. You're not on a race to graduate or to do whatever, because once you graduate, nobody's going to remember when you did it, if you did it a year before or a year after. Don't let that hinder you. And this is the time to do it, because I'm approaching 30 now, And it is more difficult, and it's just going to get more difficult. And if you're imagining to do it after your children have become 18, you're going to be doing something different. You're not going to be backpacking around Europe or whatever. So I would say, don't let the excuses get you down and just go for it.
That's great advice. I think, as you said, if you want to go, just go. I think, and a lot of people spend too much time overthinking it or finding a thousand reasons not to go, but that one reason to go might just be a decision that changes your life. So I think that's really nice advice, and it's a great note to end the podcast on. So thank you so much, Alma, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really, really nice.